At the beginning, we see Scarlet filming herself on a bus, saying she has crossed the Iranian border and is now traveling toward an area where a network of caves is about to be destroyed. Scarlet is determined to explore these caves because she believes they contain a missing piece of history, even though she knows that the penalty for trespassing could be death. Later that same night, Scarlet meets her friend Reza, who shows her the way into the caves by crawling through an opening in his house. They squeeze through a narrow passage to get inside, trying not to get caught while soldiers pass nearby without noticing them. Reza insists they should leave because time is running out, but Scarlet refuses, saying they have not even begun yet and that the caves should not be destroyed before being fully explored. The two friends run deeper into the cave system until they reach an inscription carved into a stone wall, which looks more beautiful than they expected. Scarlet begins striking the wall with a hammer while Reza begs her to stop, but the stone eventually collapses, revealing a hidden passage. She enters it and becomes very excited when she discovers a large statue resembling an animal with horns. She calls it the Pink Key and says she needs to study the carvings on it. Reza becomes frightened and urges her to leave immediately, but Scarlet insists on staying, saying loudly that her father spent his entire life searching for this statue. While she examines the inscriptions, they hear a countdown in the background. The cave begins to shake and collapse. Scarlet struggles to run through the chaos, calling for Reza and eventually finding him. Together, they escape back outside, breathing heavily and visibly terrified. Reza tells her she must be more careful and says her father's mission drove him to madness, but Scarlet remains convinced her father was not insane and believes the pursuit of this mission has real meaning despite its danger. Reza warns her that everyone who searches for the Philosopher's Stone ends up dying. In the next scene, someone is filming Scarlet as she introduces herself as a lecturer at the University of London and a passionate archaeology researcher. We then see her in Paris, where the cameraman asks what she has learned about the Philosopher's Stone. Scarlet explains that the Philosopher's Stone is a mysterious substance capable of turning ordinary metals into gold, and may even be the key to immortality. She presents drawings explaining the history of the stone, stating that its creation was the ultimate goal of alchemy, an early form of science. The cameraman asks whether there is any truth to rumors that her father suffered from mental illness. Scarlet's expression changes quickly, and she replies that many people reached that conclusion after her father took his own life. Scarlet and the cameraman walk through the streets of Paris as she points out where the famous alchemist Nicolas Flamel once lived. She continues her historical explanation, noting that grave robbers once tried to extract the stone from Flamel's tomb but found the coffin empty. They then visit a museum where they see a hand-carved tombstone belonging to Nicolas Flamel. Scarlet explains that her father believed the key to finding the Philosopher's Stone was hidden in the cryptic symbols carved into it. She adds that the meaning of these symbols remained a mystery until she discovered the Pink Key, seen at the beginning of the story. This key can translate the inscriptions into Aramaic, a language Scarlet does not speak. In the following scene, Scarlet breaks into a church door and is surprised to find George there, a man she once had a romantic relationship with. Before she can speak, he cuts her off and says he wants nothing to do with her or her past. It is revealed that the man filming everything is Benji, who is making a documentary about Scarlet's search for the stone. George looks irritated and tells Benji to stay away from her. Scarlet tries to ask George for help, but he remembers the last time they were together, which ended with him being imprisoned in Turkey. He clearly does not want to get involved again, while Scarlet remains determined to achieve her archaeological goals no matter the cost or who it affects. However, when she tells him she found the Pink Key in Iran and needs his help translating the Aramaic inscriptions on Flamel's tombstone, George begins to reconsider, and the situation shifts once again. Scarlet was extremely happy when George agreed to help her with the translation, but he insisted that this was the only thing he would do for her. The three of them went to the museum, where George began translating Nicolas Flamel's tombstone. Scarlet believed the answer might be on the back of the stone, so she lifted it and examined the reverse side, but she didn't find anything at first. She then mixed some cleaning chemicals and applied the mixture to the back of the tombstone, rubbing it firmly. She was so determined to solve the mystery that she went as far as handling an ancient historical artifact in that way. She asked for a match and lit the chemicals, then arranged them in a way that revealed a new translation. The translation appeared to read something like, "Gates of Hell." Scarlett checked her father's books and cross-referenced the information, then wrote down that about 113 meters, 500 feet, beneath Flamel's tombstone was the place where they might find the stone. Scarlett announced that they would use the catacombs to reach it. George and Scarlett looked at large maps and realized that the catacombs did not run directly under Flamel's grave, but Scarlett pointed out the existence of a hidden chamber inside them. George, in a cryptic tone, said he would not go down, and Scarlett apologized for even suggesting it. Later, we see Benji and Scarlett on a guided tour through the catacombs, where skulls are stacked along the walls. They are told it is the largest underground ossuary in the world. Scarlett notices they need a way to enter the restricted area of the catacombs to begin their search for the stone. They find a boy sitting on a rock who tells them to go to a nightclub and speak to someone named Babin, who can show them the restricted area. But when Benji looks back at the camera, the boy has disappeared. George, Scarlett, and Benji go to the nightclub searching for Babin. While there, Benji notices a pale woman in a white dress leaving the club. He films her as she looks back at him before walking away. They eventually find Babin, and although he is initially hesitant about going into the catacombs, he agrees when Scarlett tells him the hidden chamber contains treasure. An agreement is made, and Babin demands that he and his friends take half of the treasure. However, Scarlett is not interested in treasure at all. The next day, George says he will not go into the catacombs despite Scarlett's insistence. Babin introduces Scarlett and Benji to George, as well as Zid, a climber, and his girlfriend Sue. Benji continues filming while the group discusses the plan. He notices a scar on Zid's hand and asks about it, but Zid refuses to talk about it. Benji also asks Sue about the dangers of the catacombs, and she explains that if their batteries, flashlights, or water run out, they will die underground. She also mentions other dangers like tight spaces, fear, flooding, and rats. Babin warns them to be cautious when exiting the car because getting caught by the police would end badly. George insists that he will lead the group to the entrance of the catacombs. At the entrance, the group puts on head-mounted flashlights and enters a tight passage. Babin has prepared a very small hole that leads them into the catacombs. Benji checks that all the cameras attached to everyone's flashlights are working properly, while Scarlett keeps pushing George to join them. He firmly refuses, saying he will stay outside for safety. George is forced to go through the narrow opening when a police officer suddenly appears and starts chasing Babin. The whole group squeezes through the small hole. During this moment, Benji discovers that George's fear of caves comes from the tragic death of his brother, who drowned in a cave when he was a child. Scarlett apologizes to George for leaving him in a Turkish prison earlier, and says she is happy he is with them now. However, George still looks uneasy and stressed because he never actually wanted to enter the catacombs. He only agreed to come as a translator. Babin welcomes the group after escaping the police, and they continue deeper into the caves. They notice that Babin has written his nickname on the walls. They cross muddy water, and as they move forward, the tunnels become narrower and filled with dirty, rising water. At the end of the flooded passage, they find a group of women singing in a strange way, holding candles around them. One of the women stares directly into Benji's camera, and she appears to be the same pale woman they saw at the nightclub the night before. This increases tension within the group. Babin decides to crawl through a tunnel filled with bones, but Scarlett refuses and insists that a block stone passage is the correct path. Babin warns them that this place is dangerous and that anyone who goes and never returns. He tells them the story of his friend Loeb, who entered that passage and was never seen again. Despite the warning, they all crawl through the narrow bone-filled tunnel. They move carefully as Babin instructs them to stay alert. Benji struggles and almost gets stuck, causing panic, but the group encourages him until he manages to push through. However, part of the tunnel collapses behind them, though they still manage to reach the other side. On the other side, Scarlett becomes convinced they are going in circles and keep returning to the same blocked corridor. Benji becomes frustrated and scared and even hits Babin. Babin insists he knows where they are going, but he soon becomes confused and unsure of the direction. They push stones aside and pass through another passage, only to realize they are back on the same route they came from, seeing Babin's name written again on the wall. Babin denies ever being in that area before. They then hear a ringing phone in the distance. Babin explains that telephone companies once ran their lines through the catacombs. George realizes that millions of people died in this area due to building collapses and underground disasters. Babin adds that when repair crews were sent, half of them never returned. The group finds an abandoned piano. George recognizes it as identical to the piano he used to play with his brother when they were children, but they never finished a melody because one key was missing. As George remembers his childhood, he realizes the same key is still not working. Babin tells them they should not be there at all. They hear the phone ringing again, and Scarlet suddenly runs away from the group, trying to locate the sound. The others chase after her and eventually find a phone buried under dirt, still ringing. Scarlet answers the call. A muffled voice on the other end asks why she is not picking up. Confused and frightened, she hangs up. Everyone is shocked when they discover Loeb, Babin's long-lost friend, who had been missing for years. Loeb insists that none of them should be there, and appears angry that his friends never searched for him. He tells them to follow him because he knows the way out. As they run after him, cracks begin to appear in the ceiling above them. Loeb insists that the only way out is through an underground well. Scarlet says they might find the hidden chamber through the well, which could also help them escape. One by one, the group descends using safety harnesses. Benji screams from above, panicking George, but Benji reaches the bottom safely. Scarlet treats Benji's injured hand, and the group continues forward. Then, when George suddenly slips into a pool of water, their voices become muffled until a loud noise forces them to run in panic and confusion. They even see a small child in the darkness. Trying to calm themselves, the group finds a door, but it is blocked. Babin shouts in frustration. In French, George notices an eagle symbol on the wall and tells Scarlet to solve the riddle. She says they must take the correct stone from the correct place, otherwise the ceiling will collapse and kill them all. Under extreme pressure, George and Scarlet work together to find the right stone, carefully pulling at the wall until a hidden tunnel is revealed. Scarlet is the first to go through the tunnel, followed by George. Inside, they discover the decayed corpse of someone named C's, whose body has not fully decomposed. The two also find the word vital, another clue leading them toward Flamel's stone, giving the group a brief sense of hope. Scarlet insists they must go deeper and tells everyone to turn off their flashlights. A light appears from a passage, and she steps into the water below, picking up a loose stone. Babin becomes overwhelmed with fear and frustration, while Scarlet continues moving through the water. She swims underwater and writes the hidden room, where she sees a pile of gold treasure. George follows her, and the rest of the group enters as well. They are all thrilled after finding the treasure and step into the hidden chamber. Scarlet then becomes excited when she finds the Philosopher's Stone on a wall decorated with drawings. Behind her, the group removes the gate protecting the treasure, but Scarlet suddenly screams, realizing it is a trap, and she is right. The ceiling collapses, but luckily no one dies. Amid the dust and coughing, they find Sue trapped under rubble. As they pull her out, they see her arm is bleeding and begin digging to free her, but they are forced to leave her behind because the rocks are too heavy to move. The group begins to panic as they realize they have lost food and water supplies under the ruins. Babin starts rationing the flashlight batteries. Scarlet then treats Sue's bleeding arm using the Philosopher's Stone, which miraculously heals her wound, leaving everyone in shock. They continue searching for a way out, and find a door in the ceiling. Scarlet says it works in synchronization with another door, representing the phrase, "As above, so below," another riddle. They then discover a door in the floor, and use safety harnesses to lower it. Scarlet tells the group there is a passage below, and everyone follows her. George notices a sign that reads, "Abandon all hope, ye who enter here." Scarlet explains it is an inscription related to the gates of hell. Babin refuses to cross as usual, but Scarlet crawls through first, believing it resembles the place where they previously found the stone. However, she notices everything is reversed, and the group is shocked when they realize the entrance has disappeared. Babin says they might already be dead, as nothing makes sense. Scarlet returns to the water and lets out a muffled scream, which the group hears. They then emerge from the water and discover that the corpse of C's they saw earlier is now decomposing. They are then shocked to find Loeb breathing weakly in the darkness. Sue approaches to help him, but Loeb violently attacks her, slamming her head against a rock, killing her instantly. Loeb then disappears. Scarlet tries to revive Sue using the Philosopher's Stone, but it does not work. Babin stands in silence, devastated. The group continues through a dark tunnel, where Scarlet sees a mark that keeps disappearing every time she looks at it. They reach an abandoned well, and the group uses safety ropes to descend. A strange whisper calls Scarlet's name, frightening everyone. They start calling out for Benji. He is about to descend when he suddenly hears a baby crying and stops. A woman holding a child appears in front of him. Benji falls and dies, and Scarlet screams in shock and grief over his sudden death. Babin and George insist on continuing, crawling again over bones. George suddenly sees a vision of his brother Danny beneath him, and tries to push the bones away in despair. Scarlet tells him what he is seeing is not real. George asks what is happening as they hear a distant scream. They continue until they reach a burning car with a man sitting inside the flames, staring at Babin with guilt. Babin screams, "It wasn't my fault," revealing the origin of the scar on his hand. Suddenly, Babin is dragged toward the burning car. Scarlet, George, and Zid try to save him, but they fail as he is pulled into the fire and disappears. Zid is horrified, but Scarlet and George insist they must keep going. They move through a corridor and see a tall man in a black coat, terrifying them and forcing them to run in the opposite direction. George tells Scarlet that, no matter what happens, the week they spent in Turkey was the best week of his life, and she agrees. They continue forward and encounter the same man again, now sitting on a chair. They move slowly toward him as strange muffled sounds echo around them. Screaming faces appear from the walls, and the man stands up, giving them a deadly stare. The group runs as the screaming faces emerge from the walls and slash George's neck. Zid pulls him away, but blood starts pouring from George's mouth. Scarlet tries to use the stone to heal him, but it does not work. George manages to whisper the word, "Vital," another piece of the puzzle. Scarlet realizes this is not the real stone and that returning it will lead them to the true one. She rushes back, leaving Zid holding George's neck. Her hands are covered in blood as she retraces their steps. She escapes after seeing what she believes is her father hanging in front of her, but it is only an illusion. She reaches the hidden room and returns the stone, discovering that the real Philosopher's Stone is a golden reflective mirror. Meanwhile, Zid drags George deeper into the cave, and the man in the black coat approaches them. Scarlet runs and sees her father hanging before her. She tearfully apologizes to him before returning to George and kissing him, gaining a mystical power from the stone's touch, bringing George back to life. The three of them escape, facing many blocked paths until they reach another abandoned well. Scarlet insists they must jump in, saying they will survive if they confront their mistakes and fears, George's inability to save his brother, and Zid's failure to acknowledge his child. They all jump into the well and scream as they fall into the darkness. At the bottom, Zid fears they are trapped, but George discovers a manhole cover. Together, they push it open. Finally, they see daylight. They crawl out of the sewer and embrace each other after escaping the nightmare. Despite Zid's shock, the group hugs again. Scarlet looks into the camera and says she was never after money, only the truth, to prove her father was not insane and to reveal a discovery of great historical value. And that is the end of the film. Thanks for watching, and don't forget that your opinion matters to us. Be sure to leave your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel.